Yeah, it is Friday. Hope everybody's having a good week. What is good? It's Woog. We're gonna preview the DAZN doubleheader. I call it a triple header. You could also call it a quadruple header if you want to include Marlon Esparza versus Gabriela Alanis. But I want to do things a little bit differently with this particular preview. Usually, when I do a preview, I'll say this fighter, give you the record, is facing so and so, give you their record, let you know what's on the line, and more or less break it down. Um, because this will, obviously focus more so on the doubleheader. That doubleheader being Jose Ramirez versus Rances Barthelemy and Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Thomas Dulorme. We're going to, while focusing on those two fights mainly, I just want to talk more about what interests me about these fights and about the states of each of the A-side fighters' careers, meaning Jose Ramirez, Vergil Ortiz Jr. Because, the betting odds on these two fights are so lopsided. This isn't really being staged as a competitive fight, if we're talking about the main headliner, Ramirez versus Barthelemy, or even the co-main event, Ortiz versus Dulorme. This is more so a showcase of both headline A-side fighters. So because of that, I don't want to spend 15 to 18, 25 minutes getting into like the nuts and bolts of how Rances Barthelemy matches up with Jose Ramirez or how Thomas Dulorme matches up with Vergil Ortiz Jr. Safe to say, both of the A-side guys in this case should win the fight. I mean, we'll see how everything plays out. That's why they fight the fights. And I'll tell you who I think has a better shot as an underdog to pull off the upset against the A-side guy. But I'm not going to do this in the traditional preview mode that I normally would. And plus, it's Friday. I feel like just loosening up a little bit. And again, talking about what is interesting me in these two A-side fighters' careers. Stan Tucker's in the house. What's going on? What's up, Dad? Big Surge. What's going on? Thank you for coming through. Yeah, Vergil Ortiz, out of the two A-side guys, and yes, hopefully no more health issues, which has plagued the last couple years of Vergil Ortiz's career, pretty much starting with that Michael McKinson fight. Remember, they delayed that one, and that was, a couple fights that was before the whole Ortiz versus Stanionis thing. It took a couple of schedulings to get Ortiz in the ring with Michael McKinson. He ended up getting a late stoppage there. In fact, Vergil Ortiz still has a 100% knockout ratio. And, quite frankly, between the two A-side guys, Jose Ramirez and Vergil Ortiz, it's Vergil Ortiz who I'm more excited about career-wise. Is that because, Jose Ramirez has already kind of seen his way to the mountaintop, lost that close decision against Josh Taylor, and then has kind of like not plateaued, but he's been a one fight a year guy ever since that Battle of Undisputed. He fought once in that year. I think he fought once like the year before. He fought Victor Postal in 2019, won via majority decision. He fought Josh Taylor 2021. Or I'm sorry, Postal was 2020. Josh Taylor was 2021. That was the battle for Undisputed for all the marbles, right? Josh Taylor won the spoils of that one. And Ramirez then fought once in 2022 against Jose Pedraza, former 126, 130, 135 guy, now up at 140. He beat Pedraza via unanimous decision. And then he fought once in 2023 against Richard Comey. And he put the beats on Richard Comey, ended up stopping him in the 11th round. So Jose Ramirez is a very good fighter. I mean, I remember like when there was a unification bout between him and Maurice Hooker, because at that point, Jose Ramirez had won his first title against Amir Imam, beat Antonio Orozco via decision after that, beat Jose Zepeda in a could go either way type of fight after that. And then he had the unification bout where Jose Ramirez came in with the WBC belt. Maurice Hooker came in with the WBO belt, which I believe he earned it against Terry Flanagan, who was a former lightweight champ going up to 140. He met Maurice Hooker. Maurice Hooker won the WBO belt, lost that belt via 6-round stoppage against Jose Ramirez. And I think that that was the most impressive I recall seeing Jose Ramirez. I remember seeing that fight and like thinking Jose Ramirez is a real problem. And then he had the one fight against Victor Postal after that. Then he had the battle for Undisputed. So it's not that Jose Ramirez isn't a good fighter. It's just that after that loss to Josh Taylor, it seems like he's almost gone into the mode that Dimitri Bivol went in right after beating Canelo, where it's almost as if Dimitri Bivol thought that because he beat Canelo, that he should get something close to Canelo type money. It just doesn't work that way. Life is unfair, as online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer likes to say. Life is unfair. Not everybody's going to have that superstar pop, even if you think that your resume warrants that type of money. So, Jose Ramirez, again, he's been a one-time-a-year kind of fighter. And, before he just left his promoter, because he was with Top Rank for years, he left Top Rank just now to go over to Golden Boy. So this fight coming up this weekend against Rances Barthelemy, a former lightweight champion, this is pretty much Jose Ramirez's debut with Golden Boy. And it's going to be staged at a city right next to Jose Ramirez's hometown. So there's Fresno, California in Central Valley. Just outside of that, there's like Avenal, California. And Jose Ramirez is from Avenal. But Fresno is the biggest city next to Avenal. So that is where Jose Ramirez in the boxing world regionally is most celebrated. So he's going to be fighting his Golden Boy debut. But it's funny because right before he left Top Rank, they were positioning him to be the next up to battle for Teofimo Lopez's WBO 140-pound title and for the lineal title. So I'm thinking, if that was what was on the table for you, why would you move away from that? That's what fighters try to get in position for, to fight for a major title against a major A-list fighter, star fighter in Teofimo Lopez. You would think that that would be what Jose Ramirez would be aiming for, especially, 3 fights after his loss to Josh Taylor? Not Teofimo's loss to Josh. Teofimo beat Josh Taylor, but Jose Ramirez's loss to Josh Taylor. You would think that a shot against somebody like Teofimo Lopez would be what the doctor ordered, right? But so I'm thinking, why would he turn that opportunity down? And then I'm thinking the only thing that makes sense is Bob Arum and Top Rank weren't going to cough up the money that he wanted, or they were saying, yeah, you could fight Teofimo, you could fight our champ if you agree to a longer contract, like a 3 to 4 or 5 fight deal, something like that. And I could see in that case, the latter case, why Jose Ramirez would walk away from that. Because not too far before that, Jose Ramirez had a chance. They were trying to make Regis Prograis versus Jose Ramirez, which at the time would have been like 2 of the 3 or 4 best fighters in the division. And that never materialized. It just sounds like, and he validates this theory. If you hear Jose Ramirez in interviews, he often sounds like he's worth more than what Top Rank is willing to pay him. And so again, if you're not coming to terms, you either find a suitor who will pay you what you want to get paid, or you fight for a little bit less than you think you should be getting paid. And it just sounds clear that he wasn't willing to do the latter because the Prograis fight was never made. The fight against Teofimo Lopez wasn't made. So I'm just wondering, what is going to be different? What does Golden Boy have to offer him that Top Rank didn't with, Teofimo Lopez? And I'm thinking it has to be that he's angling for a fight against Ryan Garcia. That's the only thing to me that makes sense in terms of why you would go there. Now, again, he might want to have left because they were saying, no, you could fight Teo if you agree to more fights on your contract. So Jose Ramirez, again, good fighter, but it's hard to stay fired up and excited about a guy who keeps turning down the fights that you would want to see him in. You know what I mean? So there's that with Jose Ramirez. And that's largely the reason that I'm more excited about Vergil Ortiz Jr. You know, Jose Ramirez isn't that old of a fighter. I mean, you know, fighters age differently and different fighters age differently. So Jose Ramirez is only 31 years old. But like Vergil Ortiz, he's young. He's in his mid-20s, 26 years old. And again, he has pretty much missed out on pretty much realizing his potential over the past couple years because that damn rhabdomyolysis has just crippled the last couple years of his career. And with the latest one, the latest episode, when they had to stop or postpone the fight against, I'm sorry, I'm like, I did a huge run earlier. In full disclosure, I did this a workout earlier. And on my lunch break, if you will, I ran 9.3 miles. And I haven't run that much in I don't know how many years. So I'm totally burnt out this afternoon, but we're going to push through it. So with Vergil Ortiz in that latest episode where they canceled the fight against Stanionis for the third time, I really thought that might be a wrap for Jose Ramirez or for Vergil Ortiz Jr. And by the way, throughout this conversation, you might hear me mistakenly call one the other and I'll try to clear that up ASAP. But also these guys are 140, Jose Ramirez, and 154, Vergil Ortiz. So if you hear me alluding to Vergil Ortiz as 140 or Jose Ramirez as 154, know that I meant the other way around. You know what I mean? But with Vergil, I thought that if they can't get this thing under control, that's an existential threat to his fight career. He's a young fighter, but if your body's not cooperating with you and it's fighting against you, which it has now like three times that he's had to pull out of fights, once against McKinson and then the two against Stanionis, because the first of the three was Stanionis. It was due to Stanionis needing a appendectomy or something. But I'm just thinking, damn, is his career over? You know what I mean? Before it really gets going, because that would be tragic in sports terms. Because, you know, and I've said this in several videos in the past, Vergil Ortiz Jr. to me is one of the most exciting young fighters in all of boxing, any division. And the fight that really started to blow my mind with him was when he just took out Mauricio Herrera in a couple of rounds. Mauricio Herrera was, you know, the guy who should have gotten a decision in Puerto Rico against Danny Garcia. But, you know, Danny Garcia was by far the A-side fighter in that case. But Mauricio Herrera has also beaten other good fighters. Like he beat Ruslan Provodnikov like in 2011. Like Mauricio Herrera, I mean, once upon a time was a very good fighter. So he was much older by the time he fought Vergil. But when I saw the blistering viciousness of Vergil Ortiz punch for punch, especially how he was going to the body, because, you know, Herrera is kind of like he's a slick fighter, pretty defensive, good counterpuncher, moves well, moves his head well. Well, it wasn't mattering. He needed a firearm in that fight in order to get Vergil Ortiz off of him, because the way that Vergil Ortiz kind of fights with the high shoulders, throws those hard popping jabs, and then just starts taking off, ripping to the body, I'm like, oh, this fight isn't going to last long. Like, either there's some level of veteran savvy that I'm not aware of that Mauricio Herrera is tapping into that's going to pay dividends maybe down the line in this fight. But if he keeps on taking those shots to the body, this is going to be a quick night, because he's in his mid-30s, and I just don't know anybody who could take punches that sound like that and be okay. So Vergil Ortiz is one of the must-see attractions, in my view, in all of boxing. And again, I'm just worried. I'm still worried, because I don't think he's out of the woods just because he had that one-round fight against Fred Lawson in January of this year. But it's a good sign that he's already about to be back in the ring. We're in April, so this is a fight, you know, 3 months after his last, you know, because, you know, Vergil fought once in 2022, 0 times in 2023. and then January of 2024. So the fact that he's in there twice within 3 rounds, granted, the first of those 2 was a 1-rounder with a questionable stoppage. We talked about that in the last live chat where Tony Weeks stopped it, then later said, hey, Fred Lawson has some brain activity, some I forgot, it wasn't a hemorrhage, but was it a brain aneurysm? Something in the scans that was adverse. And that led to Tony Weeks stopping the fight early in the first round. So it was a very questionable stoppage. But all that to say, Vergil Ortiz had 1 round stop Lawson, maintaining his 100% knockout percentage. And 3 months later, he's going to be fighting Thomas Dulorme. Let me get to some of what you guys are saying. Hey, Jay Foreman's in the house. What up? Yeah, inactivity is such a momentum killer. Andy Ruiz is going to be fighting Big Baby Miller, and hopefully Big Baby Miller treats this more seriously than he treated that fight against Daniel Dubois, and hopefully Andy Ruiz, who's missed out on the prime years. Like, you would think that after upsetting Anthony Joshua, even if you lost that rematch via decision, he beat Luis Ortiz 2 fights later, beat Chris Arreola just before that, you would think that Andy Ruiz would want to get in there and make as much money as he can during this, point of his career. But he's like really kind of messed up in terms of just being inactive at the wrong time. But now it looks like he's in with the Saudis. Sammy Silver said 9.3 miles is insane. Yeah, it felt insane. There were so many times I wanted to stop. My pace for this one, in full disclosure, I try to, it varies, you know what I mean? But overall, it was like an 820 to 830 per mile pace on average through the 9.3. So I was trying to keep a good pace going, but man, at mile 5, I hit this lull where, I'm negotiating with myself. Like, you got another 4 to go. You sure you want to keep on doing this? And but we made it, it was tough though. Marco Cardona is in the house. What's up? Thank you for coming through. But Vergil Ortiz fighting 3 times over the course of 2 months is way different than what we were just getting from him. So hopefully that's a good sign of things to come in terms of his body cooperating. Maybe it was those additional pounds that he had to shed to get to 147. Maybe that's what would trigger or exacerbate the rhabdomyolysis. Hopefully. I would love to see him be able to string some fights together. I want to see how good this guy could be. And with this fight against again, I think he's going to be totally outmatched. Thomas Dulorme, who was really at his best around 140. He's going to be fighting Vergil at 154. It's going to be tough. You might remember Thomas Dulorme got stopped recently by, recently as in the last couple of years, by Boots Ennis. Before that, he lost I want to say a decision against, who was it against? Stanionis. He lost a decision against Stanionis, and he got stopped at 140 by Terrence Crawford. Those other 2 losses I mentioned were at 147. Now he's at 154 against Vergil Ortiz. So this, to me, isn't going to be a true test, a 154 test for Vergil. This, to me, is just another kind of a tune-up fight. But what lies on the other side of this? If Vergil Ortiz handles business against Thomas Dulorme, he's going to have to fight. Well, not he's going to have to fight. Apparently he wants to. He's signing up to fight Tim Tszyu on that Terrence Crawford versus Israel Madrimov undercard. Think about that. Vergil Ortiz, who's only fought 1 round against Fred Lawson and now has this upcoming fight against former 140 guy Thomas Dulorme, is going to then jump up to fight arguably the best guy at 154. So the stakes are really high. I mean, obviously Vergil has to handle business on Saturday, but damn, Tim Tszyu, like, as much as I like Vergil, I really wish he got to fight Stanionis, and I hope Stanionis gets to fight a lot in 2024. But I wanted to see Vergil fight against, Cody Crowley, or I don't know, Boots Ennis, or even who's the other guy I want? Conor Benn before the PED test. I thought that was a fight that I would have really wanted to see Vergil Ortiz in at 147. And I like Vergil at 147. He was kind of taller than most of the opposition. He had that kind of lean build. It just made those vicious shots look like they were zipping even harder and faster. At 154, he seems to have filled out a little bit more. I don't know if his boxing ability and his speed is going to carry to 154 and translate well I don't know if what that transition is going to really look like. Again, we didn't really get a good look with that fight against Fred Lawson. 1 round is all we got, less than a round. And I don't think that this fight against Thomas Dulorme is going to tell us a lot. I mean, it's going to be impressive if he gets Dulorme out in a few rounds, which I kind of expect him to. I don't think, look, I don't know if Thomas Dulorme thinks that he's got a shot in this one. And, again, he used to be a pretty formidable fighter. Pretty recently, he also lost a decision against Jamal James, a former lesser belt holder, at 147. And Jamal James lost his thing to Butayev, then Butayev lost to Stanionis. That's how Stanionis holds a lesser belt. But with Thomas Dulorme, I don't think he doesn't really have a good chance. And so if Ortiz gets him out of there in a few rounds, it'll look good for Vergil. It'll look like, oh yeah, Vergil's back. Not that he ever lost. I'm saying back from the illness, right? His body's cooperating. But it's Thomas Dulorme is not a top 10 154 guy. He's not a top 15 154 guy. He's not a top 20 154 guy. He is simply an opponent that they're putting in there, with Vergil Ortiz. So how do you go from fighting Fred? Now, granted, Ortiz had a couple pretty good fights at 147. Maurice Hooker, Mean Machine Kavyaskis. Before that, he fought and beat Samuel Vargas. Like I said, Mauricio Herrera. I think he beat was it Orozco or was it it was Orozco, Antonio Orozco and Brad Solomon. So those were like Vergil's last several 147 wins. But at 154, again, it's Frederick Lawson and Thomas Dulorme before getting in there to fight Tim Tszyu, who I kind of think is the best at 154 right now. Like, I feel like if they ran it back between him and the current WBO, props to him, champion Sebastian Fundora, I feel like if they ran it back, Tim Tszyu would win that. I mean, I thought that he was on his way to winning the fight before getting his head split and just having a face mask of blood throughout the fight. So, look, I haven't checked on what the betting odds are for Tim Tszyu against Vergil, but as impressive as Vergil is, again, vicious puncher, Tim Tszyu has shown us what he's capable of at 154. And, to complicate matters even further with this Vergil Ortiz versus Thomas Dulorme and then the stakes of Ortiz versus Tim Tszyu, assuming he beats Dulorme, Vergil versus Tim Tszyu will make the winner the mandatory for the WBA 154 title. That's the belt that's going to be held by the main event winner of that same card, either Terrence Crawford or the current champ, Israel Madrimov. One of them is going to walk away with the WBA title, and Vergil or Tim Tszyu will then be in line. Whoever wins that will be in line to fight the winner of Madrimov and Crawford. So that alone is, okay, that's very interesting, high stakes. But what muddies things up even more is that this week, we just got word that former undisputed 154-pound champion, fresh off his disappointing, lackluster, did he even try type of loss to Canelo Alvarez, Jermell Charlo, he just activated and enforced his WBA mandatory status. So the question is, who's got first dibs on the Crawford versus Madrimov winner? Is it Jermell Charlo or is it the Tim Tszyu versus Vergil Ortiz Jr. winner? I don't have the answer to that. I think that is Jermell Charlo because he was the belt holder who was then named a champion in recess. I think that he's got the front of the line even ahead of Ortiz, Vergil Ortiz and Tim Tszyu. So it's a little bit complicated. And Tim Tszyu was just the WBO champion who was just fighting to unify that with the WBC belt. The event played out like it did, and he ended up coughing it all up to Sebastian Fundora, who I think that they're going to try to position to fight. It might be Errol Spence, but we'll see. Like, it's going to be a while before Fundora is allowed to re-enter the ring because of his broken nose. it's going to be like late 2024 before Fundora fights again. Hot facts with Robert Reese is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Crawford Zoo, yeah. Crawford Zoo would be nasty. So you want Charlo over you want Charlo versus the Crawford Madrimov winner. And by the way, yes, Crawford is going to be the favorite against Madrimov, but I would not sleep on Madrimov's chances here. Like, he's a solid. He's the guy who just beat Kurbanov on that AJ versus Ngannou undercard. He is a pretty good. He moves pretty well. He's pretty quick. He's somewhat elusive. He obviously hits pretty damn hard. I mean, Kurbanov wasn't able to get out of first or second gear, and Kurbanov had the better resume between he and Madrimov going into that fight, and Madrimov just pretty much put on like a one-sided beatdown, got him out of there by like the 5th or 6th round. It was really impressive. It was right either before or after that Ray Vargas Nick Ball fight that ended up in the draw. But Crawford should beat Madrimov, but this is going to be Crawford's 154 debut, and Madrimov is a proven 154 guy. But every time I start thinking, well, Crawford's going to be giving up a lot of size to this guy, I said this in the last chat, it always impresses me once Crawford is in the ring against the guy who I thought might be bigger than him, on paper, bigger than him, Errol Spence and several others, Crawford ends up looking like as big or the bigger guy in the ring. I wouldn't be surprised if Crawford looks bigger than his 154 opponent, Israel Madrimov, once they are in the ring. And plus, Crawford's going to have a reach advantage. Madrimov has maybe like a 68, 69 inch reach, like close to 70, maybe just below. And Crawford has a 74 inch reach, which that should not go understated. If you ever slap box somebody or even put the gloves on and started mixing it up, you will realize really quick two things. Who's got the hand speed advantage? That's the first thing you're going to figure out. And then the second thing is who's got the reach, because once you start learning how to like measure distance and learning how to get out of range and then somewhat in range, and then knowing that once you cross a certain threshold, hey, red alert, incoming fire could come at any time. Having a 3 to 4 plus inch reach advantage, it's priceless once those guys get in the ring. And that's why Crawford is able to sometimes kind of lay back and throw like a 3 to 4 punch combination. And the guy might think that he's a little bit out of range. Then he gets hit with an uppercut, out cold, like David Avanesian 2 fights ago for Crawford. So but Crawford is going to be 37 years old in September. So he's going to be 36 in this fight against Madrimov, right? And we're going to get back to the DAZN card, but I just want to cover this. But he's also, by the time he gets in the ring, he's going to have been out of the ring for like 13 months. So more than a year of inactivity after the Spence fight. I know that sometimes as fans, we take for granted when a fighter looks great one night, and then even in the next fight, we assume that same guy is going to enter the ring in that next fight. It doesn't always work out that way. Like, it's really a fight by fight thing. And sometimes, again, the cliff happens like this, and sometimes it's a little bit more gradual. And there are a lot of things that contribute to the incline or decline of that cliff. One of the big things is, have you been active? Terrence Crawford, I know he's a gym rat. He stays in there. But, what's the cliche? Father Time is undefeated. When Floyd Mayweather was the same age as Terrence Crawford, he was beating up Canelo, right? And then he fought Maidana twice. So Crawford is right at that edge of the cliff. If he is, we'll see what he looks like in his next fight. Again, he hasn't been active over the past year. But no fighter, no matter how well you take care of yourself in those lower divisions meaning anything from 135 to, let's say, 147, 154 in the case of Crawford. If you look at the greats of the past, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, and I know Thomas Hearns fought a long time. So did, Roberto Duran. He fought very, very late. But if you look at all these guys when they were 36, they were not nearly what they were in their prime. And then you have other examples. Oscar De La Hoya. Now, granted, Oscar didn't take care of himself, but look at where he was career-wise at 36. He was nearing retirement at 36. Look at Shane Mosley. I'm just naming recent welterweight-ish fighters, lightweight to welterweight, and then up for certain fights type of fighters. Felix Trinidad, look at him at 36. He might have been retired by 36. I'd have to double check that, but we're entering kind of scary times for the fight trajectory, even of a Terrence Crawford right now. So I'm not going to just take for granted and assume that he's going to beat Madrimov. I think that there are going to be interesting moments of that fight. Remember, Crawford got rocked by Mean Machine a few years ago. I expect Crawford to handle his business eventually, but it's a scary thing. He's going up in weight too. Inactivity, age, going up in weight. We'll see. But yeah, Vergil versus Dulorme is going to allow Vergil to then fight Tim Tszyu, which is then going to, we'll see how they work it out with Jermell Charlo. But in theory, it's supposed to make them the mandatory for the 154 title. By the way, maybe what they do is, well, yeah, no, I don't know how they're going to handle that, because that sounds like it's two conflicting paths to the challengership, if you will, of that WBA 154 belt. But switching back over to the main event, Jose Ramirez versus Rances Barthelemy, I think that Rances Barthelemy has a better chance at pulling off an upset against Ramirez than Dulorme does against Vergil Ortiz Jr. Rances Barthelemy, again, he's a former belt holder at 135. I think the guy that he beat was Denis Shafikov. You might or might not remember him, but he was a pretty good fighter. He was a Russian fighter. I think his nickname was like Genghis Khan. That was like his fighter nickname. But back in the day, meaning about 10 years ago, a little less than 10 years ago, Shafikov beat Jamel Herring. Shafikov beat via TKO, late TKO. Shafikov beat Richard Comey. So Shafikov was a real fighter. He lost to other guys like Miguel Vasquez. He lost to Robert Easter later on down the line. But Shafikov is who Rances Barthelemy beat to become, I believe, an IBF 135 lightweight champion. Rances Barthelemy is also the guy who beat Carol Relic. He beat Carol Relic, who you might remember is the guy that Regis Prograis beat to become a champion at 140 before he lost in the World Boxing Super Series finals against Josh Taylor. So in the semifinals, Regis Prograis beat Carol Relic, took that, which belt was it? Might have been the WBO, WBC. I think it might have been a different belt, but he took one of the belts, right? And then he lost that against Josh Taylor. But Carol Relic he was kind of looked at as a keep your eye on this guy type of fighter for a while. And he was a Belarusian fighter. I think he's from Belarus, but he was a knockout puncher, very hard puncher. But Rances Barthelemy beat him in their first fight, and then they ran it back, and Carol Relic won a close fight in the rematch. And that was kind of what elevated Carol Relic's status. So Rances Barthelemy, again, former lightweight champion, as recently as I think like a year to 2 years ago, somewhere in between that. Barthelemy, a Cuban fighter. Is he I think he's an Orthodox fighter, but he's very defensive minded. He moves well, at least at his best. Not a power puncher, although he does have a 50% knockout ratio. He'll knock out lesser fighters. Like if he fights like a CD level guy, like he had a fight against Gustavo Vittori. This was 2021. Knocked him out in the second round. So, if you're an elite fighter, you don't have to worry about the knockout so much, but he's a good boxer all around. In fact, he fought Gary Antoine Russell, who also just left PBC. You hear about that? I heard about that like right after we did the last live a couple of days ago. Gary Antoine Russell kind of followed suit with a lot of other fighters, left PBC. I'm not exactly sure where he's going. My guess would be one of the DAZN entities, one of the either Golden Boy or Matchroom. I would guess Matchroom. Matchroom's doing a lot of poaching these days from other promoters. Usually you don't see a fighter who, gains some status and then goes to Bob Arum Top Rank. Top Rank gets guys from like the amateurs up. And then you eventually leave when you want to make multi-million dollars. Some stay for a long time, Timothy Bradley, Manny Pacquiao, but Top Rank isn't usually the place that you go after you've already had a career elsewhere. So I'd be curious to see if Gary Antoine Russell becomes the latest out of a series of fighters recently, Subriel Matias and others, signing with Eddie Hearn in Matchroom. I like Gary Antoine Russell. He's not as quick as his older brother, Gary Russell Jr., but he's a harder hitter. He's up a couple divisions. He's a 140 guy. But when Gary Antoine Russell fought Rances Barthelemy, Barthelemy held his own, even dropped Gary Antoine Russell. Russell battled back, got back into it, knocked Barthelemy down, and that led to a questionable 6-round stoppage. So I saw that and I'm like, damn, I really wanted to see how that fight was going to play out, because Barthelemy got back up and he looked like he was good to go. The ref waved it off. I'm like, you're not going to give like a fighter of this stature a chance to like get back into it once he's made it back to his feet? I mean, they've got one knockdown apiece now. They're even, let the guy fight it out just a little bit, see if he's okay. But they didn't give him really that opportunity. So I wasn't sure what to make of that. Barthelemy, this was in July 2022. Barthelemy has had one fight since, in May of 2023, against Omar Juarez. He beat him via a close majority decision, which wasn't the greatest thing, because you would want a Barthelemy to considerably, like noticeably and demonstratively beat a fighter who's just way lesser caliber. So then I'm wondering, like, has Barthelemy, between relative inactivity, not super inactive, but one fight 2023, one fight 2022, 2 fights 2021, 0 fights in that COVID 2020. A lot of fighters had trouble booking that year. But before that, he was a super active and very decorated fighter. But between the relative inactivity and the fact that he's now 37 years old, again, in a lower weight class, he's a 140 guy right now. I'm just wondering if Barthelemy is way post-prime, even further post-prime than he was when he fought Gary Antoine Russell in 2022. It's a strong possibility. I'm going to take a quick sip. Jay Foreman said, I'd have to favor Zoo over Ortiz. Even a healthy Ortiz would have problems with Zoo. Yeah, that's the thing. And again, I would have liked to have seen Vergil get more acclimated at 154 before you go for like the king of the hill. You know what I mean? It's like, damn, you talk about ballsy move. Son of Apollo is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, good to hear from you. So Barthelemy's age has me thinking, I was thinking that he loses a decision to Jose Ramirez. But the way that Jose Ramirez starts to commit to the body, starts to kind of pour it on once he gets going, it had me thinking maybe Jose Ramirez via stoppage. But then I was thinking, well, Jose Ramirez has also had some real inactivity. He hasn't been the most active fighter. So I kind of look at this fight as being him kind of getting his bearings back. So for that reason, plus, I would say the veteran savvy of a Rances Barthelemy, I'm going to give Barthelemy the benefit of the doubt and say that he goes the distance. So I don't think Thomas Dulorme goes the distance against Vergil Ortiz Jr., but I am going to pick Rances Barthelemy to lose a unanimous decision against Jose Ramirez. So that's why I'm going to go with that one. But again, we talked about this at the top of the hour with Jose Ramirez turning down certain opportunities, like the opportunity to fight Teofimo Lopez and then breaking from the promoter and now going with Golden Boy from Top Rank. Like, what is the end game? Does he think that he's about to be in position to fight Ryan Garcia? Again, if that's the plan, and if he's talked with, he's talked with Oscar about this, and Oscar sounds game and down, and Ryan is with it, then okay, like, yeah, do that. With or without a belt, But outside of that, like, who is, if you didn't want to fight Prograis for what you were going to get paid for that fight, unless they're suddenly going to give you more for that fight, I would still like to see Prograis versus Jose Ramirez. Are you going to fight Subriel Matias, who again is with Matchroom, and do the Matchroom Golden Boy thing? it's on the table. But again, if you didn't want to do it with Prograis, didn't want to fight Tio for what they were offering, I'd imagine they're not going to offer you the world to fight a lesser known outside of the boxing community, but a dangerous fighter in Subriel Matias. Not to say that, look, I think Jose Ramirez would have a good chance at beating Subriel Matias. Regis Prograis, with the latest that we saw of Prograis, I'm not sure. Before that, I would have picked Prograis over Ramirez, but I think that Ramirez would have a good chance of beating even Teofimo Lopez, Ryan Garcia, any of these guys, unless he has had a big drop off in his performance ability. But again, the kind of the pickiness in this at this stage of his career, I just don't know if it's not Ryan Garcia who he's going to fight next, but stay tuned. So to reiterate, I'm going Jose Ramirez to beat Rances Barthelemy via decision, unanimous decision. I'm going Vergil Ortiz to stop Thomas Dulorme before the 8th round. I wouldn't be surprised if it's as early as within 4 to 5 rounds, but I don't see it going into the 8th round. At the latest, I see a 6th or 7th round stoppage there. But there's also another fight that interests me. I'm going to get into this before we break. This one actually has to be a little bit shorter of a live chat, but I want to talk a little bit about kind of like the lesser discussed. It's not, they don't even build this as a triple header. In my video thumbnail, I said triple header because I would like to include this one. Again, you could say quadruple header if you want to talk about the title fight. I mean, 3 of the belts are on the line. Marlon Esparza is running it back with Gabriela Alanis. Esparza beat Alanis, and has all 3 belts, but some thought that it was controversial. I didn't, but they're going to be running it back. But Oscar Duarte is going to be fighting Jojo Diaz. Jojo Diaz has lost a lot of fights lately, hasn't he? I mean, he just lost to, what was the guy's name? Jesus, the guy who had a lot of offensive output, a ton of volume. Jojo lost to him. Jojo lost to Mercito Hesta. Before that, he got obliterated. He made it the whole fight. He's not getting stopped by any of these guys, by the way, but he got beaten to a pulp. Like, he took so many shots from William Zepeda, one of the most exciting and best fighters at 135. He lost to him. He lost to Devin Haney. So, Jojo Diaz has been taking a lot of L's lately. And it wasn't a good look after that last fight against Jesus. I'm going to get the guy's name, but in that last loss, he blamed his promoter, basically saying that his promoter's like conspiring. Golden Boy, who's been representing him for years now, it has been conspiring for him to lose. And I'm thinking, like, damn, if anything, you're the bigger name of these 2 guys. Like, his opponent was, let me see. It was Jesus Perez. Perez won I thought Jojo deserved the win. Perez was credited with a split decision win. He was awarded the win. Jojo aired out his promoter. And I'm thinking, look, Jesus Perez doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, right? Why would Golden Boy conspire so you lose? You've got a name, Jojo Diaz, right? Why would they conspire for you to lose against Jesus Perez? Like, Jesus Perez isn't somebody who's like just like rising up in popularity with the bullet, But I did think that he deserved the win. I think what the judges were missing was that Jesus Perez, because of his volume, was looking like he was just doing a lot more, just throwing like 100 punches, just a ton of punches around. But if you look at the way that Jojo Diaz, in the midst of those exchanges, was kind of threading the needle, he was throwing those like little hooks in between Perez's punches. And Perez might open up with like 5 punches, but the 2 that Jojo threw were like landing cleaner and like more effectively, making the bigger splash. And you could see that Perez didn't see that one coming the way that Jojo kind of was rolling and moving with a lot of Perez's punches. So again, I thought that he deserved the win there. But again, Jojo Diaz has now lost 4 out of his last 5 fights. Haney, Zepeda, Hesta, Jesus Perez. And now he's going to be fighting Oscar Duarte, the guy who was looking pretty decent against Ryan Garcia before getting stopped in the 8th. Remember, Oscar Duarte got dropped by Garcia in the 8th. Garcia just opened up. After Garcia started moving around the perimeter for a couple of rounds, kind of puzzling everybody, like, what the hell is he doing? And this was after he started doing that for the first time, and people are like, what the hell is that? So it looked like Duarte started closing some of the distance. Duarte likes to throw a lot of body punches. He applies a lot of pressure. He's a pretty hard hitter, but the best guy that he's beaten and that he's, the best guy that he's fought is Ryan Garcia. The best guy that he's beaten is, I think, Alex Martin. But Oscar Duarte hits pretty hard, but he has to kind of like be dug in. Like, you have to stop moving for him to start taking off and feel comfortable throwing punches. Duarte, unlike Jesus Perez, Mercito Hesta, William Zepeda, is himself a lower volume guy. He doesn't throw a ton of punches, especially like Zepeda and Jesus Perez. So I don't think JoJo is going to have the same types of issues that he's been having with some of these high volume guys as Oscar Duarte. In fact, Duarte is going to be the favorite, I believe. Here, I haven't checked the odds on this one, but they're billing this, I believe, as Oscar Duarte versus Jojo Diaz. I think they're trying to do something with Oscar Duarte. He's the younger fighter, but I think that Jojo's got a real shot here. I think that he's the better boxer of the two. The thing about JoJo is that I've never liked him at 135. He was good at 136 or 126 featherweight. 130 is where he won his belt. Because when he was at 126, he was beating everybody except for Gary Russell Jr. That Gary Russell Jr. is the only guy to beat JoJo at 126. Then at 130, he beat Tevin Farmer. Remember him? He beat Tevin Farmer for the IBF 130-pound title and then lost that belt on the scale before his next fight against Shavkat Rakhimov, who recently lost. Rakhimov looks like he's very post-prime after that beating against Joe Cordina that I think was still a split decision or something. But Shavkat isn't what he was, in my view. But Jojo Diaz lost his belt before that fight, ended up fighting a draw with Shavkat, and then went up to lightweight, fought a small lightweight in Javier Fortuna, the same guy that later fought Ryan Garcia above 135. Fortuna was a former 126-pound champion, but Jojo Diaz was pretty good at 130. He hit hard, relatively hard at 126, less hard, but still formidable at 130. At 135, he just ain't scaring nobody. You know what I mean? Like, he just isn't getting that respect, punch for punch at lightweight. Duarte, if nothing else, can punch. So JoJo is durable. So I don't, that's the thing. He doesn't get stopped. So is Oscar Duarte, the younger, harder hitter, naturally bigger guy, who's not as good a technical boxer, in my view, as Jojo Diaz, is Duarte going to overwhelm JoJo? Is he going to outbox him? Because JoJo could get very low volume in spots too. Like, he's a good boxer, but sometimes, like, round for round, I'm like, damn, if he would just throw some more punches, man. So I'm thinking JoJo will be in the fight. He will be formidable. He'll be competitive. But I think that he won't give enough volume to win enough rounds against Oscar Duarte. So I don't think Duarte is going to stop JoJo. I think it's going to be another close, disputed decision win for Duarte, where maybe a lot of people thought that JoJo deserved the win. That's kind of how I see that one playing out. Baller Notes is in the house. What up? Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. So to sum it up, with this DAZN quadruple header, but they're billing it as a double header, I've got Jose Ramirez defeating Rances Barthelemy via unanimous decision. Again, I was thinking stoppage, but I think Barthelemy going to show enough savvy to survive, and I think that Jose Ramirez himself has been inactive. The question is, how is Rances Barthelemy going to take it once he starts getting kind of trapped and cornered along the rope? Because that's where Jose Ramirez will do his best work. Rewatch Jose Ramirez versus Maurice Hooker. Maurice Hooker's his corner, and this is when Hooker was undefeated, I believe. Yeah, I think he was undefeated when he entered the ring against Jose Ramirez. Hooker's corner was saying, stay off the damn ropes. Stay off the ropes. And they were just imploring him to do it. But Jose Ramirez, in his own way, after eating jabs in the early rounds, Hooker was outboxing Ramirez early. But Ramirez, in true Ramirez fashion, started to trap and corner Hooker, started letting those power punches go, those ripping shots, like Vergil Ortiz. to the body, ended up stopping Maurice Hooker. I wonder how the slick-ish Rances Barthelemy is going to handle that work to the body once Jose Ramirez really gets going. So I think that by the end of this, Rances Barthelemy will have taken a beating, but I think he's going to be durable enough to survive a decision loss. By the way, both Jose Ramirez and Vergil Ortiz are trained by Robert Garcia. So, I was wondering when Jose Ramirez was at 140 and Vergil was at 147, I was thinking, will they ever fight each other? But it's like, no, not as long as they're both trained by Robert Garcia. Now, for a while there, Vergil Ortiz left Garcia, started working with Manny Robles, started working with another trainer after that. Now he's back with Robert Garcia, which I always liked him with Robert Garcia. I know his dad, Vergil Ortiz Sr., said, hey, no, I've always been his trainer. It was me way before as Robert Garcia, but Robert Garcia is the former trainer of the year. You know what I mean? Like, the guy's got pedigree. I like Vergil Ortiz Jr. working with Robert Garcia, period. So, again, Ramirez over Barthelemy via decision. Vergil Ortiz Jr. over Thomas Dulorme via early to mid-round stoppage. And then I've got Oscar Duarte winning a close decision against Joseph Jojo Diaz. So, yeah, I'm going to have to wrap this one up. This one's a little bit shorter than some of the other live chats. I didn't even notice until, I got off that last live chat that it was it ran for 157, about close to 2 hours or something, but it was a blast and there was a lot to cover. So I'm going to do another one of these in a few days. I'll do recaps on these fights after they take place. Next week, by the way, is obviously Canelo Alvarez versus Jaime Munguia. So I plan to, be pretty busy that week, preview video, hopefully a live chat as well. So yeah, I can't wait to get that going. And I'm going to do my best not to talk Canelo versus David Benavidez. By the way, I just heard Canelo in another interview, this time with Dan Rayfield. Dan Rayfield asked the question, people want to see you fight David Benavidez, and Canelo gave the same thing about all he brings is an extra 20 pounds into the ring. What am I? I've already done everything in boxing that I need to do, or I've already proved everything against the fighters that they wanted me to fight, that they said I wouldn't fight. And I've already proven everything to everybody. I can do whatever I want now. I don't need to fight this guy, 20 pounds, who's going to be bringing in all this extra weight in the ring. And then Dan Rayfield press. He's like, but, you have fought at light heavyweight against bigger, Dmitry Bivol, Sergey Kovalev. You fought light heavyweights before. And then Canelo just kind of repeated what he said. Dan Rayfield asked one or two more follow-ups, but it just sounds clear that Canelo doesn't sound interested in getting in there with David Benavidez. And again, now that David Benavidez is supposedly, or officially now, right, moving up to 175, this time to fight Alexander Gvozdyk, I have doubts on whether Canelo versus Benavidez ever happens. But yeah, Canelo versus Jaime Munguia is next weekend. We're going to cover that one. I know we also have Naoya Inoue versus Luis Neri coming up in not too long. I've got to check on when the date of that one is, actually. Bear with me, because I want to do a preview and some live chatting on that one. So that one is May 6th. So that one is right after Canelo versus Jaime Munguia. Is it really May 6th? So that was on a Sunday. Usually they do the fights in Tokyo or in Japan. They'll usually do it on Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday, but usually Tuesday. I kind of like it. You get to, I set my alarm early. It's super early. It's still dark outside in the morning. And here we got the co-main event, before the Naoya Inoue fight. So I like it when there's something like that on the boxing landscape. But yeah, so it sounds like after the Canelo fight, you got to wake up early to catch Inoue versus Luis Neri. But yeah, I look forward to covering and watching that one as well. But yeah, so those are my picks for this coming weekend. I'm going to thank you guys for coming in. Again, this one was a little bit shorter, but Son of Apollo, Baller Notes, Jay Foreman, Hot Facts with Robert Reese, Marcos Cardona, Sammy Silver, Big Surge, Stan Tucker. Yeah, thank you guys. And if you guys missed the first half an hour, I go way more in depth on the Ramirez versus Barthelemy fight and just the different things about each fighter's career, each A-side fighter. Jose Ramirez and Vergil Ortiz. I get deep into what interests me about their fighters or what puzzles me about their careers and what puzzles me about their careers. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Woog. Thanks, y'all. Enjoy the fights.